Just before I begin, I'd like to mention that this gentleman here, Bill Kennedy, he's going to videotape this today. That's why I'm wearing one microphone, so I don't want to carry another. Bill, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. There's a flyer on each of your places that outlines quite a bit about what Bill does and what he's all about. But I can assure you, for a very, very technical and professional guy, he's like a kid in a sandbox. He loves to play at his job, and he's really good. So if anyone's interested in videos of any sort, there's some information about what Bill does at your place settings. So without further ado, I'm going to take about 30 minutes of your time, and then I want to open it up to questions and answers, and you guys can then schmooze and network and take off early or whatever it is you want to do. But we should be through here by 8:30, 8:35. Well, 30 years ago, I was hired by the old petroleum drilling fluids company, NL Bayreuth. Second row down, 10th from the end up there, there's a plaque. But they're no longer in business, they're now part of Halliburton. I was hired to work in their London office by the gentleman that I'm now married to. And he is a gentleman, most of the time. 30 years later, we're still working together, but now we're running Cattermole and Associates, which is a management and financial consulting firm. Well, I'm not going to regale you with 30-year-old history. Not that interesting. What I want to talk about today are the problems that we're facing as we transition from recession to recovery. Most specifically, I'd like to talk about the problems as they relate to employee engagement, retention, and their impact on the bottom line. Really, I think that we need to adopt a new paradigm, a new way of looking at how to do business that makes it profitable, especially now that we're in a somewhat shaky recovery. Depending on what you read and what you hear, we're somewhere in transition nearer to recession or nearer to recovery. We'll probably not know unless we have the benefit of hindsight down the road. But it's safe to say that we are in somewhat of a recovery, but it's not very strong. And why am I talking about employee engagement and retention at a time when unemployment is hovering around 10%? Actually, if you include the underemployed in that number, it's a lot higher. Well, this great transition from recession to recovery is especially poignant, I think, to mention, because like no other recession, this has had a terrible impact on the workforce. And unless we're clever and careful about how we address some of the personnel issues that we're facing, it's going to deal a critical blow to that recovery. In end of 2009, around about August, September 2009, Deloitte Consulting published a report, some of the findings of which I'm going to share with you that are very telling. 49% of the people surveyed in that report said that they were going to leave their jobs in the 12 months following the end of the recession. 49%. Deloitte referred to this as the upcoming resume-tsumani, and that they coined it well. 50% of the people surveyed said that they were dissatisfied with their jobs and job security. And 76% of them said that they were disconnected or disengaged from their jobs. That's unprecedented. We haven't seen figures like that since they've been collected. Now, that resume tsunami may already be happening, because the Department of Labor recently came out showing that for February, March, and April of this year, more people were quitting their jobs voluntarily than were being laid off. Now, yes, that happens typically when the recession is moving to recovery. You see more people see the job market open up and they do more quitting. But if 49% of them go to another job, companies, not just individual companies, but the economy is going to have a bit of a problem. For every person that leaves and is replaced, it costs one to three times their annual salary. So just, put it in terms of what that would cost your company if that happened. Now, sure enough, these people have been traumatized in a certain way. They've watched their colleagues go over a long period of time, and I'm sure everyone in this room has had some experience with layoffs. Either they've been laid off themselves or they've known people who've been laid off. And when this goes on long enough, the people who are left, they feel that dagger hanging over their head, and it really upsets them. and it makes them less efficient. Add to that they've had to take a cut in pay. Many of them have had to work extra long hours, and just as many people have had to go without their bonuses. So everyone's experienced hardship, even though some of them have kept their jobs. The net result of all this is that, as I mentioned before, it could deal a critical blow to the economy as it recovers if we're not smart about what we do about that. On a brighter side, though, I'd like to introduce you to 3 people that I recently met at the regional conference of the Association for Corporate Growth. These 3 CEOs are Howard Bahar, actually former president of Starbucks International, Colleen Abdullah, the CEO of WOW Internet and Cable in Colorado Springs, and Tim Miller of Rally Software in Boulder. He's their CEO. Now, I bring these up because they represented many of the people at the conference, the 2-day event, who talked about what makes companies successful. By any measure, these people have had very successful companies, outperforming the competition time and time again, managing to grow their organizations through good times and bad times, including 2009. And when you heard about all their figures and all their successes, people wanted to know, what's the secret to your success? Come on, let's share. And to a man, they all said there was one thing that really their success depended on, not just their success, but their sustained success. And that was that they had a high-performing and highly engaged workforce that was predicated on adhering to business best practices on a daily basis. Now, that doesn't sound too new or too radical, best business practices. That's why they're called best business practices, because they work. And employee engagement, which is not so much heard about or understood, but nevertheless is not really radical. It's been known about for a long time. So wouldn't we want to take their example and look at how we could implement best practices and get a culture of highly engaged and high-performing employees? That's possible, but what I'm going to do is answer a few questions that raises. For example, what is engagement? What does it look like? And what's its counterpart, disengagement, and what does it look like? Can you measure these things? And if so, what does it tell you? Is there a cost of disengagement to the organization? Is there a financial benefit? We've heard these 3 say in their cases, yes, there's definitely a financial benefit. But how can you measure it? How can you see it? And how can you prove it? And then, what are best business practices anyway? We hear the phrase, but what does it mean? And then finally, how can we marry up best business practices resulting in high engagement and profit? I'm going to attempt to answer all those questions today. And at the end, I'd like you to ask me your own questions and give me your comments and concerns. But I'd appreciate if you just hear me out first. Of course, if I'm being mealy-mouthed and don't make sense, please just raise your hand and say, hey boss, I just don't get you. Fill me in here. So let's start with understanding engagement. What is it? Well, engaged employees are passionate about their jobs. They are physically, mentally, and emotionally attached to the vision and the mission of their organization. They know what the company is about. They know what it stands for. They know where it's going. And more importantly, they know what their role is in the organization and how it impacts the overall performance of that company. So they're completely bought in. And they're not doing it because they're brown nosers. They're doing it because they really enjoy it. And many of them would actually do it for no money. And some of them do.